Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our series on famous samurai. The link to part 1 is in the description if you haven't watched it yet and are interested in doing so. There's no need for any introductions today. Let's just get straight into it with our first samurai, Hattori Hanzo. Timestamps are included if you want to skip ahead or go back and listen once more. Let's begin. Hattori Hanzo was born as the son of one Hattori Ieyasu, who was a low-ranking samurai serving the Matsudaira, later Tokugawa clan. Although he was born in the then Mikawa province, which is nowadays Igacho, Okazaki, and Aichi province, he frequently visited Iga province, the ancestral land of the Hattori clan. At the age of 15, he engaged in his inaugural military encounter, which involved a night attack as part of the Udo Castle siege in 1557. No easy feat, and a trial by fire, that's for sure, especially at 15 years old. Well, that was just the style of the time, I suppose. Well, Hanzo began serving Tokugawa Ieyasu in 1561. That was the days when Ieyasu was still known as Matsudaira Motoyasu, so still very early days in those times in the Ieyasu timeline. Hanzo played a significant role in Ieyasu's ascent to power by assisting the future shogun in overthrowing the Imagawa clan. And in 1562, the following year, Hanzo successfully rescued Tokugawa's wife and son, who had been held hostage by Imagawa Ujizane at Kaminoko Castle. Of course, this put him in very good favor with the new shogun. Now, in 1563, a significant event took place that involved Hanzo. The Iko-Iki followers had revolted in Mikawa and were engaged in combat against Ieyasu. Furthermore, a significant portion of the vassals belonging to the Tokugawa clan were adherents of the Iko sect. Honda Masanobu and the majority of his followers allied with the Iko-Iki and initiated aggressive measures against Ieyasu. During that period, Hanzo, who was also, by the way, a member of the Iko-Iki, chose to remain loyal to the Tokugawa clan, and he actively supported Ieyasu in his battle against the rebels. In 1569, Hanzo initiated a military campaign to besiege Kakegawa Castle in order to confront the Imagawa clan, and between 1570 and 73, he demonstrated exceptional performance in the battles of Anegawa and Mikatagahara, respectively, that being Anagawa in 1570 and Mikatagahara in 1573. Well, in 1575, he wedded the offspring of his comrade-in-arms, Nagasaka Nobumasa, who also held a position of military command. His son would be born approximately 1 year later. In 1579, Matsudaira Nobuyasu was accused of treason and conspiracy by Oda Nobunaga. As a result, his father, Ieyasu, ordered him to commit seppuku. Hanzo was summoned to oversee the ceremony, but he declined to carry out the act of killing his own lord. Upon learning of Hanzo's difficult experience, Ieyasu greatly appreciated his loyalty and remarked, "Even a malevolent being is capable of displaying emotions by shedding tears." In 1580, another altercation between Hanzo and the Hattori clan took place. At that time, a military leader from the Oda clan was residing in Hamamatsu Castle to prepare for supporting the Oda-Tokugawa alliance in their assault on Takatenjin Castle, which was at that time under the control of the Takeda clan's forces. Nevertheless, a conflict arose between the castle commander and a Tokugawa retainer, all over a very minor issue. Hanzo was attempting to be the mediator. Nevertheless, the retainers of the Ogaki clan, who were aligned with the castle commander, launched an attack on Hanzo. That's the problem when you stand in the middle of the road. You just get hit from both sides. Well, in response, the members of the Hattori clan were not going to stand back and do nothing. They fought back, and they fought back hard, and there was casualties on both sides. Due to this incident, the Ogaki clan insisted on holding Hanzo accountable and executing him. But his old friend Ieyasu successfully deceived the Oda clan by initially feigning the arrest of Hanzo. Subsequently, Ieyasu granted Hanzo the permission to liberate himself, his spouse, and his child from the confinement in Hamamatsu Castle. Of course, Ieyasu cunningly tricked the Ogaki clan by offering them a severed head which belonged to a completely different person, all while insisting that it was certainly the head of Hanzo. Well, you would assume that they knew what Hanzo looked like, and upon opening the little goodie bag with the head inside would realize, this isn't him. Perhaps they couldn't recognize him because he was always wearing his helmet in combat. I don't know. Now, in June 1582, following the Honnoji incident, Tokugawa Ieyasu fled from Sakai to return to Mikawa in order to evade capture by Akechi Mitsuhide and his soldiers. Ieyasu was accompanied by a mere 34 comrades, and of course Hanzo was among them. The journey they embarked was exceptionally perilous, mainly because of the presence of the Ochimushagari, also known as the samurai hunting gangs. Well, Ieyasu and his entourage opted for the most direct path to return to the Mikawa province by traversing right through the Iga province. This route is described differently depending on what source you look at, such as the Tokugawa Nikki or the Mikawa Todai Hon records. Well, according to the Tokugawa Nikki theory, Ieyasu traveled along the roads to Shijonoate and Son-enji, and then followed the Kizu stream until they reached Yamaguchi Castle, where they spent the night. On the following day, they arrived at a fortified settlement of the Koka-iki clan of Tarao, who granted them refuge for the night. On the final day, Ieyasu's group utilized a vessel from the Shiroko to travel to Okazaki Castle. Modern historians question the validity of the Tokugawa Nikki theory, mainly because it was not the most direct of routes for Ieyasu to travel from Sakai to Mikawa. Additionally, this path was considered dangerous due to the hostile presence of the Ika-iki clans, who were certainly not friends of the Oda or the Tokugawa clan. Well, the other source we mentioned was the Mikawa Todai Hon records. Well, according to them, Ieyasu traveled north from Ogawadate, traversed Koka, and reached Seishu Seki via Shigaraki. He then proceeded through the Aburahi and arrived at Tsuge in Iga. This theory was advocated by contemporary Japanese historians from Mie University, who questioned the authenticity of the narrative concerning Hanzo's ninja aiding Ieyasu. While this skepticism arises from the fact that the story only emerges in the 18th century, some couple hundred years after the actual events, during the reign of Tokugawa Yoshimune, and that's certainly enough time for things to change. Several individuals purporting to be the descendants of the Koka-iki clans also endorsed this theory of their route. Well, prior to reaching Kada Pass, where they could receive assistance from the Koka clan Jizamurai, Ieyasu primarily relied on his esteemed vassals for protection, specifically the 4 Shitenno generals, rather than the commonly held belief regarding the aid of the Iga ninja clans. Although it certainly paints a nice little story, doesn't it? Sometimes history's a little more boring than we like it to be, I'm afraid. Well, don't let that ruin the fun, though. Irrespective of the veracity of any theory, though, historians do unanimously concur that the journey finished at Kada, that is the mountain pass situated between Kameyama town and Iga. The Tokugawa faction was subjected to a final assault by the Ochimushagari bandits at Kada Pass. Remember, those are those samurai hunters. What a difficult job. Well, that marked the boundary there at the Kada Pass of the Koka-iki clan's territory. So if they were gonna get them, that was the place. The Koka-iki clan were allies of the Tokugawa clan, and they were located in this area. The Koka-iki samurai aided Ieyasu in eradicating raiders and provided escort until they arrived in Iga province. There, they received additional protection from allied clans from Iga-iki, who accompanied Ieyasu's group until they reached the safety of Mikawa. In his book, History of Japan, the Portuguese missionary Louis Frois, sorry about the Portuguese pronunciation, documented that during their journey, Tokugawa retainers, including Sakai Tadatsugu, Lee Naomasa, Honda Tadakatsu, Sakibara Yasumasa, and others, fought against the Ochimushagari outlaws who were attacking them and generally causing them a great deal of trouble. They were escorting Ieyasu and had to resort to paying bribes of gold and silver to some of the outlaws they could negotiate with. In his journal, Ietada Niki, Matsudaira Ietada documented that Ieyasu's escorts experienced approximately 200 casualties as a result of raids conducted by bandits and outlaws during their journey. As per the historical record of Iga's history book compiled in the Edo period, the ninja of the Iga clan, including Hanzo, participated in every battle involving the Tokugawa clan, without exception. These battles range from the Battle of Izu Nirayama in 1582 to the summer siege of Osaka in 1615. The Tensho Jingo War of late 1582 erupted between the Tokugawa, Uesugi, and Hojo clans. Hanzo, of course, threw his hat in with Tokugawa Ieyasu in the conflict, and strategically positioned his forces in different forts in the Kofu Basin. Meanwhile, Another samurai, Ujinao, stationed his army in present-day Hokuto city area. Hanzo commanded the Iga clan soldiers to Katsuyama Castle, Misakuchi Castle, and Koto Hirayama Castle, all located in Kofu City. From these positions he oversaw the Nakamichi Road, which connected the regions of Kai and Suruga. Simultaneously, a military unit under the control of Hanzo from the Iga province, which was part of the Tokugawa army, launched an invasion into the Saku district. They received assistance from samurai warriors belonging to the Tsugane clan from Shinano, led by Obi Sukemitsu. Hanzo and Sukemitsu executed a nocturnal assault on Egusuku Castle in early September, effectively seizing control of it amidst a torrential downpour. Certainly makes things difficult when you're trying to walk uphill. He also stealthily captured the Sanagoya Castle in Izu province, of which he had a commendation from Ieyasu personally for this accomplishment. Thus Hanzo remained in the service of Ieyasu during the Battle of Komaki and Nagakute in 1584. In this battle, Hanzo personally led a group of 100 warriors from Iga and Koka as reinforcements from Matsugashima Castle, while commanding them to march to Ise. The defending forces utilized rifles, kind of new at the time, to protect the castle against the invading Toyotomi troops. In 1590, Hanzo took part in the Odawara campaign, leading a contingent of 50 members from Neguro Shu, a mercenary group known for their use of firearms, which originated in Ki province. Well, due to an undisclosed ailment, some 7 years later, on January 2nd, 1597, Hanzo passed away, but he left behind a legendary status as a samurai leader who led a formidable unit of 200 Iga warriors. His tales of exploits frequently ascribe him with a range of almost supernatural abilities. Some even claim teleportation, psychokinesis, and even precognition. It's pretty handy to have him around, I'm sure. Well, following his demise in 1597, Hanzo was replaced by his son, who shared the same name, Hattori Mitsunari, albeit dispelled with different characters. He was bestowed with the title of Iwami no Kami, and his Iga men were appointed as guards of Edo Castle, which served as a central administration center of a now unified Japan. The name Hanzo has been inherited by successive leaders of the Hattori family, indicating that both his father and his successor were also named Hanzo. Undoubtedly, throughout history, there were a minimum of 5 individuals who gained recognition under this very name, and even now, remnants of Hanzo's heritage endure. The Tokyo Imperial Palace, previously known as the Shogun's Palace, retains a gate known as Hanzo's Gate, called Hanzomon in Japanese. And also the Hanzomon subway line, which stretches from Hanzomon Station in central Tokyo to the southwestern suburbs, is named after this very gate, which was once the site of his residence. The area surrounding Hanzo's Gate is commonly referred to as Wakaba, although it was previously called Iga Town before 1943. Hanzo's remains are currently interred in the cemetery of Sainenji Temple, located in Yotsuya, Tokyo. In addition, the temple houses his preferred spear and ceremonial battle helmet. In fact, the spear is quite heavy. It weighs around 7.5 kilograms, and it's about 424 centimeters in length. It was bestowed upon him by Ieyasu himself, and later presented by Hanzo as a votive offering to the temple. Unfortunately, during the bombing of Tokyo in 1945, it sustained some damage. Not good. Well, while some of his remaining possessions are in decent condition, and by the way accessible for public viewing, the majority of his weapons, armor, and even his letters of commendation were destroyed in a fire that occurred not in 1945, but actually in 1606, all the way back in those times when those relics were housed at Edo Castle. A very unfortunate event that took place in his former living quarters, which were also affected by the removal of his son from military duty and that rather tumultuous siege of Osaka. Ishida Mitsunari was born in 1559 in the northern part of Omi province, which is currently known as Nakahama City in the Shiga prefecture, and it's quite a lovely little place. He was the second son of one Ishida Masatsugu, who served as a retainer for the Azai clan. His name, during his childhood, was Sakichi. The Ishida clan retired from military service following the Azai clan's defeat in 1573 during the siege of Odani Castle. Legend has it that he was a Buddhist monk in a temple before becoming a servant to Toyotomi Hideyoshi. However, the accuracy of this legend is a little bit questionable, as it only emerged during the later Edo period, so take that one with a little grain of salt. Now, Mitsunari encountered Toyotomi Hideyoshi in 1577, during Mitsunari's youth and Hideyoshi's tenure as the daimyo of Nakahama. Subsequently, Mitsunari assumed the role of a samurai officer under Hideyoshi's command. During Hideyoshi's military campaign in the Chugoku region, Mitsunari supported his lord by participating in attacks on castles such as Tottori and Takamatsu Castle, both which are located in the present-day Okayama. Mitsunari took part in the Battle of Shizukatake in 1583, and, as stated in the old sources, he was assigned the task of conducting espionage on Shibata Katsuie's army, and he also achieved a notable accomplishment in Ichiban Yari, which is basically being the first to thrust a spear at an enemy soldier while serving as a frontline warrior. That's right, achievement unlocked. Subsequently, he participated in the Battle of Komaki and the Battle of Nagakute in 1584, slowly building up that resume. And in that very year, he served as a kenchi. What is a kenchi? It's effectively a survey magistrate. He did this in the modern-day Omi province in Gamo County. In 1585, Mitsunari was designated as the administrator of Sakai, a position he assumed alongside his older brother Ishida Masazumi. He was designated as one of the 5 Bugyo, which were the highest-ranking officials in Hideyoshi's government. The other Bugyo were Asano Nagamusa, Maeda Genni, Mashita Nagamori, and Natsuka Masae. Hideyoshi appointed him as daimyo of Sawayama in Omi province, granting him a fief of 500,000 kodu, now part of Hikone. Well, Sawayama Castle was renowned for its exceptional fortifications for the time. Really built up. Thick walls with lots of nice little holes to shoot people out of. A good place to be, if you're inside, but pretty impossible to get into. In January 1586, he recruited Shima Sakon, a renowned commander known for his wisdom and courage. In 1588, some 2 years later, Mitsunari was assigned the responsibility of overseeing the renowned sword hunt initiated by Hideyoshi. The purpose of this endeavor was to disarm the majority of the population who were not part of the military, with the aim of maintaining peace. In 1590, a military operation targeting the Hojo clan, he laid siege to Oshi and successfully seized Oshi Castle. In 1592, he actively took part in the Japanese invasions of Korea as one of the 3 bureaucrats alongside Nagamori and Nagamasa. But Mitsunari disobeyed Hideyoshi's command to execute 26 Christian missionaries in 1597, which certainly raised a few eyebrows. You don't just go disobeying commands like that, especially ones from Hideyoshi, the big boss. Well, within that same year, Mitsunari was purportedly engaged in efforts to bring an end to the conflict with Korea and China, which, well, it didn't really go very well. Anyway, Mitsunari held a prominent position among bureaucrats in Hideyoshi's government and was renowned for his resolute character. And despite pecking orders and all the rest, he was not going to be pushed around. Like I said, disobeying orders is a pretty gutsy move. But he also had numerous acquaintances, with 2 particularly noteworthy individuals being the renowned samurai Otani Yoshitsugu and also Shima Sakon. Nevertheless, Mitsunari had strained relationships with several daimyo who were renowned for their prowess in battle, such as Kuroda Nagamasa and Hachisuka Ieyasu, as well as Hideyoshi's nephew, Kobayakawa Hideaki. Now, Kobayakawa Hideaki harbored animosity towards Mitsunari due to the persistent rumors propagated by Tokugawa Ieyasu, alleging that Mitsunari himself was responsible for his uncle's refusal to grant him Chigoku as a consequence of Kobayakawa's reckless actions during the siege of Ulsan in Korea. Well, in the final stages of Taiko Hideyoshi's life, he commanded the execution of his successor Hidetsugu and Hidetsugu's family, thereby designating his new successor as the very young child Toyotomi Hideyori. Following Hideyoshi's demise, the disputes within the court escalated. The primary issue at the heart of the conflict revolved around the trustworthiness of Tokugawa as a loyal ally to the Toyotomi government. This government was headed by a young lord, with the actual decision-making power resting in the hands of a council of regents. Following the demise of the esteemed neutral Maeda Toshie in 1599, the conflict escalated into armed confrontation as Mitsunari assembled a coalition of Toyotomi loyalists to oppose Tokugawa Ieyasu. He garnered significant backing from Hideyoshi's three regents, Ukita Hideya, Mori Terumoto, and Uesugi Kakegatsu, who hailed from the southern and western regions of Japan, along with the inclusion of the Uesugi clan in the northern region. Ieyasu garnered support primarily from central and eastern Japan, yet he exerted his influence and employed intimidation tactics on certain western lords as well. Mori Terumoto held the title of leader in the Western Alliance, but he remained firmly stationed in Osaka Castle, safe and sound, and the responsibility of leading the alliance in the field was assumed directly by Mitsunari. Thus, the campaign commenced in the mid-1600s. Mitsunari laid siege to Fushimi Castle prior to engaging in direct confrontation with Tokugawa's coalition at Sekigahara. That's the big one. During the Battle of Sekigahara, on October 21st, several lords opted for a neutral stance, observing the conflict from a distance, unwilling to align themselves with a side that was destined to lose. But the Tokugawa forces achieved a decisive advantage in the battle through the treachery of one Kobayakawa Hideaki, which ultimately led to their victory. Well, it was their victory, but it was Mitsunari's loss, and following the loss at the Battle of Sekigahara, he attempted to flee, but he was apprehended, not by the military, but by angry local residents. That's one way to get captured. Well, they took him to Kyoto, and then he had his head cut off. Additionally, Konishi Yukinaga and Angokuji Ekie, who were the daimyos of the Western Army, were also subjected to similar treatment. Following his execution, his decapitated head was exhibited on a pedestal for public viewing in Kyoto. His mortal remains were interned at Sangen Inn, a subordinate temple of the Daitokuji in Kyoto. According to legend, though, Ieyasu spared his life and concealed him for political motives, with one of his experienced commanders, Sakikabara Yasumasa, where he lived until old age and died from natural causes. Hard to confirm that one, but it's a legend. In recognition of Yasumasa's silence, Mitsunari presented him with a tanto, kind of like a short sword, known as Ishida Sadamune, which is a highly esteemed cultural artifact in Japan. As per the Asano clan documents, it is believed that Mitsunari's standing as a military commander was significantly tarnished as a result of his alleged poor performance during the siege of Oshi. Specifically, his failed tactic of flooding the castle in order to compel the defenders to surrender. Contrary to some records, modern historian Nakano Anai has revealed that the water flooding attack was actually ordered by Hideyoshi himself. This instruction was then relayed by Asano Nagamasa and Kimura Shigekore, while Mitsunari merely did what he was told, and he didn't really have the freedom to create his own plans. Well, there is another theory. In 1598, 2 years before the events at Sekigahara and following the demise of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the Japanese government experienced an incident involving a conspiracy to assassinate Ishida Mitsunari. The plan was orchestrated by 7 military generals: Masanori, Kiyomasa, Terumasa, Tadaoke, Yoshinaga, Yoshiaki, and Nagamasa. Contrary to the traditional portrayal of this event as the 7 generals against Mitsunari, contemporary historian Watanabe Daimon has highlighted that there were actually 2 additional generals who participated in the conflict against Mitsunari. Notably, Hatsuka Iemasa and Kuroda Yoshitaka also brought their troops and entourage to confront him. The conspiracy was motivated by the general's dissatisfaction with Mitsunari's negative assessments and under-reportings of their achievements during the Imjin War against Korea and the Chinese Empire. Additionally, some, like Tadaoki, accused Mitsunari of mismanagement during his time under Hideyoshi. Additionally, these military leaders convened at Kiyomasa's residence within Osaka Castle, and subsequently relocated to Mitsunari's residence. Nevertheless, Mitsunari became aware of this information through a report provided by a servant of Hideyori named Jiemon Kuwajima, and consequently he promptly escaped to Satake Yoshinobu's residence, accompanied by Shima Sakon and a few other individuals in order to conceal himself. Upon discovering Mitsunari's absence from the mansion, the 7 generals proceeded to search the residences of several feudal lords within Osaka Castle. Additionally, Kato's army advanced towards the Satake residence. Mitsunari and his companions consequently fled from the Satake residence and fortified themselves at Fushimi Castle. On the following day, the 7 generals encircled the castle with their troops, as they were well aware that Mitsunari was hiding within, like a toy within a Kinder egg. Tokugawa Ieyasu, who held authority over political matters, was attempting to mediate the situation at Fushimi Castle. The 7 generals demanded that Ieyasu surrender Mitsunari, but Ieyasu refused to comply, subsequently engaging in negotiations to fulfill his promise of allowing Mitsunari to retire, and re-evaluation of the Battle of Ulsan Castle in Korea, which was the primary cause of the incident. The Imjin War was very complicated. Yes, I'll make a video about it soon. Don't worry. Oh, I should do it next. Well, additionally, he arranged for his 2nd son, Yuki Hideyasu, to accompany Mitsunari to Sawayama Castle. But nevertheless, historians such as Daimon, Junji Mitsunari, and Goki Mizuno have highlighted from the available primary and secondary sources that the incident was primarily a legal dispute among the generals rather than a deliberate plot to assassinate him. It just got a little bit out of hand, as things tend to do when tempers flare. Ieyasu's role in this context was not to provide physical protection for Mitsunari against any potential harm, but rather to simply act as a mediator for the legal grievances raised by military faction members who had issues with Mitsunari. Well, taking all this into account, the more accurate term to describe this incident would probably be a lawsuit by military generals against Mitsunari, rather than a conspiracy by 7 angry men to pin him down and kill him. Well, there are some historians who interpreted this incident as more than just a personal conflict. They saw it as an expansion of the broader political rivalries between the Tokugawa faction and the anti-Tokugawa faction, which was led by Mitsunari. Following this event, the military leaders who had a negative relationship with Mitsunari subsequently sided with Ieyasu during the Sekigahara conflict, which pitted the Eastern Army led by Tokugawa against the Western Army led by Ishida Mitsunari. For a considerable duration, the widely accepted belief regarding the cause of the Sekigahara War between Mitsunari and Ieyasu was that it stemmed from their mutual hostility. Nevertheless, a professor at Nara University, Tonoka Shinichiro, and the director of Suruga City Museum disputes this perspective. And you know you have to listen to your teachers, right? Well, Shinichiro argued that the political actions that precipitated the conflict in Sekigahara were primarily driven by Mitsunari's desire to reclaim his political standing, get that respect back, following the coup orchestrated by military factions. According to Shinichiro, these events had no direct connection to any personal rivalry between Mitsunari and Ieyasu. I suppose I could go and try and learn Japanese a bit better and try and read the primary sources, but that would take my attention away from making videos now, wouldn't it? Now, on to the final samurai for today's video. Well, this one's a little bit more modern. Not completely modern, but we're talking 19th century. Sakamoto Ryoma. I hate the R sounds in Japanese, so I'll do my best with them. Sakamoto Ryoma was born on January the 3rd, 1836 in Kochi, which at the time was part of the Tosa domain in Tosa province, which is of course now Kochi Prefecture on the island of Shikoku. Now, in terms of the Japanese calendar, he was born on the 6th year of Tenpo, November the 15th, but we'll try to stick to Western chronology just to have things make sense a little bit more. Well, the Sakamoto family belonged to the lowest rank in the samurai hierarchy, known as Goshi. Still samurais, but they obtained this by accumulating significant wealth as sake brewers in previous generations. That's one way to do it. Tosa distinguished itself from other Japanese domains by implementing a rigorous division between the Joshi, who were high-ranking samurai, and the Kashi, who were low-ranking samurai. The ranks were subject to unequal treatment, and residential areas were segregated, including in the generation of Sakamoto Ryoma, the third in the Sakamoto family, where his family's samurai rank remained at that lower Kashi level. At the age of 12, Sakamoto was admitted to a private school, although this was a short-lived period in his life, as he displayed reportedly very minimal interest in academic pursuits. After being subjected to bullying at school, Ryoma's older sister promptly registered him for fencing lessons at the Oguri-ryu, where he reached the age of 14, studying there on how to improve his swordsmanship. Upon reaching adulthood, Sakamoto had acquired a reputation as an accomplished swordsman. In 1853, Sakamoto was granted permission by his clan to journey to Edo, the administrative center of the ruling Tokugawa shogunate and the unofficial capital of Japan, in order to refine and enhance his expertise in sword arts. he became a student at the renowned Hokushin Ito Ryu Hyoha Chibidojo, under the leadership of its inaugural headmaster, Masamichi. Sakamoto was presented with the scroll by the school, which officially recognized his expertise, kind of like getting a degree. He also attained the rank of Shihan at the Chiba Dojo, and alongside Kazutane instructed students in the art of Kenjutsu. He developed a deep friendship with this Kazutane. Now, things were about to shake up a little bit, with the Perry expedition commencing in 1853, coinciding with Sakamoto's academic pursuits and pedagogical activities in Edo, thereby marking the onset of the Bakumatsu era. That is, those final days of old Japan. The sunset period, I suppose we can call it. Commodore Matthew C. Perry, representing the United States, arrived in Japan with a formidable fleet of ships to forcefully terminate their long-standing policy of national isolationism. Force open the doors. Well, it's free trade after all, right? In March of 1854, Perry exerted pressure on the Tokugawa shogunate to sign the Convention of Kanagawa, thereby formally terminating the isolationist Sakoku policy. However, the treaty in Japan was widely regarded as being completely unfair, and showing the country's hand of being a vulnerable position. The public's perception of the shogun, who held the position of a de facto military dictator with a nominal appointment from the Emperor of Japan, was significantly undermined in terms of prestige and legitimacy. It didn't look good, effectively bending the knee to these barbarians. Ironic, isn't it? Well, the convention was signed by the Roju Abe Masahiro, who acted as regent for the young and sickly Tokugawa Ieyasu, despite the opposition of the imperial court in Kyoto, which held the legitimate ruling power. The anti-Tokugawa faction interpreted this evidence as a sign that the shogun was simply no longer capable of carrying out the emperor's wishes, and was therefore unfit to continue ruling on his behalf. Sakamoto and numerous samurai advocated for the restoration of state authority to the imperial court in Kyoto, and actively sought to topple the Tokugawa shogunate. So, upon finishing up his studies, Sakamoto returned to Tosa in 1858 and became involved in the local Sono-Joi movement, which emerged as a response to the Convention of Kanagawa and aimed to oppose the Tokugawa regime. Thus, in 1862, Takechi Hanbeta, a friend of Sakamoto, established the Tosa Loyalist Party, named Kinoto. This organization, consisting of approximately 2,000 samurai, albeit from the lower ranks, adhered to the Sono-Joi ideology. Their political agenda centered around their slogan, "Revere the Emperor, expel the barbarians," emphasizing the need for reform within the Tosa government. Yamauchi Toyoshige, the daimyo lord of the Tosa domain, declined to acknowledge the group, but he couldn't really ignore it right under his nose. But as a reaction, Tosa Kinoto devised a plan to carry out the assassination of Yoshida Toyo, the governor appointed by Yamauchi, who was known for his efforts in implementing reforms and modernization. Yoshida was subsequently assassinated by Kinoto following Sakamoto's departure from Tosa. Sakamoto was involved in the conspiracy, but he did not support it, at least not in public. He believed that Tosa Kinoto should take action for the benefit of all Japan, whereas Takechi insisted on a revolution solely for the Tosa clan. Sakamoto made the decision to part ways with Takechi and depart from Tosa without obtaining permission. During that time, individuals in Japan were strictly prohibited from departing their clan without authorization, under severe consequence of death. They had a word for it too: Dapan. One of Sakamoto's sisters tragically took her own life after leaving without authorization, preferring to take the self-checkout line rather than have somebody else catch up with her. And Sakamoto subsequently adopted the pseudonym Saitani Umetaro while actively opposing the shogun. In the diary of one Ernest Sato, dated the 30th of September 1867, Sakamoto is referred to by this pseudonym. During his time as a ronin, Sakamoto made the decision to carry out the assassination of Katsukaishu, a prominent figure in the Tokugawa shogunate, who held high rank and advocated for both modernization and westernization. Nevertheless, Katsukaishu managed to convince Sakamoto of the imperative need for a comprehensive strategy to enhance Japan's military capabilities in response to this new and confusing Western influence, ultimately resulting in the signing of the Convention of Kanagawa. Rather than assassinating Katsukaishu, Sakamoto opted to become his assistant and protégé. In 1864, due to the Tokugawa shogunate's increasing intolerance towards those who opposed them, Sakamoto escaped to Kagoshima in Satsuma domain, which was emerging as a prominent hub for the anti-Tokugawa movement. In 1866, Sakamoto participated in the negotiation of the covert Sacho alliance between the Satsuma and Choshu domains, which were historically bitter adversaries. He established the private maritime and commercial enterprise known as the Kameyama Shachu in Nagasaki City, with the assistance of the Satsuma domain, which subsequently transformed into the Kaientai, or the Ocean Support Fleet. After Choshu achieved victory over the Tokugawa army in 1866, and the Tokugawa shogunate was on the verge of collapse, Sakamoto became highly sought after by his former masters in Tosa. As a result, he was summoned back to Kochi, and with great recognition and respect, treated like a local hero, returning in silk robes, as they say in China. Well, back to Japan, though. The Tosa domain was eager to secure a diplomatic resolution between the shogun and the emperor in order to prevent the formidable Sacho alliance from forcibly overthrowing the Tokugawa and establishing themselves as the new ruling power in Japan. Sakamoto was once again there to play a pivotal role in the subsequent negotiations that resulted in the voluntary resignation of the shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu in 1867, thereby pulling the trigger on the Meiji Restoration. Ooh, full video on that soon. No spoiler alerts for now, though. Well, in March 1866, representatives of the shogunate made an effort to murder Sakamoto Ryoma by setting up an ambush for him at the Teradaya Ryokan in Kyoto. Two facets of this have gained renown. Now, initially, he received a warning from his prospective spouse, Narasaki Ryo, who was quite taken aback while bathing by the assailants and hurried to alert him. Furthermore, he employed a Smith & Wesson revolver, a firearm of Western origin, of course, which he used to repel the assailants, because nothing repels assailants like a Smith & Wesson revolver. I suppose there's maybe a few things that he didn't mind taking from the Westerners, especially in a sticky situation like that. Well, either way, Sakamoto was murdered at the Omiya Inn in Kyoto in the following year, the 10th of December 1867, shortly before the official Meiji Restoration occurred. He was 31 at the time of his death. Way too young, even for those days. You see, during a night time, a group of assassins assembled outside the entrance of the inn. One of them advanced towards the door and knocked upon it, pretending to be a regular visitor. Sakamoto's bodyguard and servant, Yamada Tokichi, who was actually a former sumo wrestler, by the way, responded to the door and informed the visitor that he would check if Sakamoto was available to receive guests at the time of evening. Upon the bodyguard's momentary lapse of attention, the individual at the entrance swiftly unsheathed his sword and inflicted a mortal wound up against the bodyguard's back. Cowardly, waiting till he turned around to attack him from behind. Now that's not very courageous at all. Well, the group of assassins swiftly advanced beyond the mortally wounded bodyguard and ascended the staircase towards the accommodation of the guests. Sakamoto and his companion, Nakaoka Shintaro, were taking a break and engaging in conversation within a single room. He heard the commotion coming from the first floor and promptly opened the door to ask his bodyguard what the dickens was going on, under the mistaken belief that he was engaged in a friendly wrestling match, showing off his skills. Perhaps he had a few cheeky sakes while Sakamoto was not looking. Well, of course, it wasn't him. The assassins swiftly entered the room, forcefully breaking through the paper doors, which are, well, they're not a very good defense. Could have chosen wooden doors. Maybe that's another thing they can take from the Westerners to prevent the assassination attempts. Well, a chaotic and disoriented brawl ensued as lamps were toppled, causing the room to be completely engulfed in darkness. At the conclusion of the battle, Sakamoto and Shintaro were severely injured, and the assassins escaped. But Sakamoto perished that evening, blood loss, expressing remorse in his final utterances for being caught off guard by his unknown assailants. Shintaro didn't fare too well either. He only lasted another 2 days due to his injuries, without ever fully regaining consciousness to identify the assassins. However, he did mention hearing the Iyo dialect among the perpetrators, so they mustn't have been locals. Early accounts of Sakamoto and Shintaro's fatalities implicated individuals affiliated with the Shinsengumi, a specialized law enforcement unit comprised of swordsmen under the authority of the Bakufu, that is the military government of the Tokugawa shogunate, located in Kyoto. Kondo Izami, the leader of this Shinsengumi, was subsequently executed on this accusation. Nevertheless, individuals belonging to a different faction supportive of the shogun, known as the Mimawarigumi, admitted to the act of homicide in the year 1870, some 3 years after the event. While Sasaki Tadasaburo and Imai Nobuo from Mimawarigumi, some of the names are difficult, give me a break, have been held responsible, the actual perpetrator's identity remains unverified. A bit of a mystery to this day. There is one Okuda Matsugoro, renowned for his early involvement as a spy for Kondo, who was allegedly involved in the assassination. But of course the key word is allegedly. Well, Sakamoto is remembered as a visionary who aspired for a self-governing Japan, free from feudalism and the caste system, drawing inspiration from the United States, where the principle of equality was upheld. And he also held a deep admiration for the democratic principles and extensively studied the governance systems of the United States Congress and the British Parliament. He viewed these models as potential frameworks for governing Japan following the Restoration, a tool to be used, but he was not going to let his country be governed by outsiders. That's the difference. Sakamoto contended, due to centuries of political powerlessness, the imperial court was deficient in the necessary resources and competence to govern the nation. Sakamoto authored the 8 proposals while shipboard during a conversation with Goto Shojiro about the prospective structure of the Japanese government. This took place aboard a Tosa vessel located off the coast of Nagasaki in 1867. He emphasized the necessity of establishing a legislature through democratic elections, drafting a constitution, creating a national army and navy, and implementing regulations for the exchange rates of gold and silver. He also familiarized himself with Western civilization, and recognized that in order for Japan to effectively contend with an industrially and technologically progressive global economy, the Japanese populace had to go through a modernization process. His proposals are believed to have laid the foundation for the parliamentary system that was established in Japan following his demise. His style is characterized by a captivating blend of traditional and modern elements, exemplified by his choice to wear samurai attire, but pairing it with a nice pair of Western shoes. Comfort is king, of course. Well, I have tried wearing those, I don't want to use the word clogs, but I don't know the Japanese word for them. They are those shoes with the little wooden ones with the heel on them on both sides, and, well, they're not as fun as they look. Let's just say that. The other Japanese outfits are great, though. Had a good time in Kyoto with that. I will recommend Kiyomizudera. And Kinkakuji. Yeah, Kinkakuji is good too. The golden temple in the middle of that small lake. Beautiful places. But don't go in the summer. Oh, do not go in the summer. Well, we've reached the end of part 2 of Famous Samurai. I'm going to thank my top tier patrons now, as I always do. That is Ben, Melissa, Dark, Scott, Aaron, James, Tim, Wendy, Jeffrey, JC, Stark Factory, Charles, and Britt. Thank you so much. You know I dearly appreciate your contributions. And hey, if you're still listening all the way to this point, look at you. An hour of learning. Good job. I'll see you tomorrow, right here on YouTube, if you feel like coming back. But just make sure you get a good rest, friend. I know it's difficult out there. Good night. Love to you all.